Hello, friends. This is Brian Foreman at the Campbell Center for Church and Community, and I am thrilled today to introduce you all, if you don't know him already, to my colleague and my friend Colin Kroll, who is the director of the Campbell Youth Theological Institute, or as we call it around our parts, City. And if you have a teenager in your house, you need to know more about City anyway, and perhaps we'll talk about that in a little bit. But for now, Colin, I'm going to start this the way I started with everybody. What's good, Colin?
This morning, what's good is having the chance to talk to you. It is Christmas time at Campbell, which means no one is on campus. A lot of people are taking their end of the year vacation time so they don't lose it. And it's been far too quiet today. So it's just good to see a familiar face and be able to catch up a little bit. Uh, it's a good day for coffee to make it through. I wish I could show uh, Cup of Mystic Monks Jingle Bell Java, which is a roaster at a monastery out in Wyoming that makes fantastic coffee. But I'm all out of ground coffee right now, so I'm back at Starbucks. So,
Well, that'll work in a pinch, but to those of y'all who are watching, Mystic Monk Coffee Roasters is amazing. It is well worth your time to look it up. And they have a really cool story and amazing two-handled mugs. So much good there. Thanks for mentioning that about it. Anything else that you want to jump in there and say about what's good?
I also, while we were getting set up and making sure technology was ready, your daughter Adria came down, and she's just one of my favorite humans, and got to hear her current work of bringing positivity to the people she's close with, and just one of those people that is so filled with joy and positivity that you can't help but catch a little bit of it when you see her. So it was good to see Adria. It's been a little while, and
Yeah, we are so grateful for the young woman she's becoming, and also starting sort of that early grieving process because she's a high school senior. And thankfully, she's a high school senior that has invested in really good relationships and made really good choices. And so she's volunteered at places like A Place at the Table in Raleigh. She works at a little boutique called Flourish that empowers women and women entrepreneurs. She did 3 years with City. I think she's trying to figure out how to do more. Um,
me
and,
too.
I mean, she's one of those kids that has made good choices to surround herself with good people like yourself who have poured into her. And I think that's one of the real gifts of something like City is it's not just you there, but it's the mentors, it's the faculty and staff that participate as well, and the fact that they give to the students that are there and invest in them, and that's really cool. So, as a parent, obviously, I'm thrilled and proud of who my daughter is becoming, but I'm also grateful for the people who've been a part of that, and you're certainly a part of that, and so thank you for that. But I also think people should know a little bit more about the idea of faith and vocation, the work of faith and vocation that you do, and why that's important with high school students. I didn't prep you for this question because I knew I didn't have to. Um, but since we're there, tell me a little bit about why faith and vocation with high school students is so important to their faith development and their becoming human, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think before we focus in on with high school students, we can talk about why it's important for all of us, why it's important for us to ask the questions of who is God calling us to be and what is God calling us to do, because we are surrounded by this ever-present uh, threat or inclination to slip into autopilot, and to miss the beauty in the day to day and the truth in the day to day and the opportunity to participate in the work of Christ every single day wherever we are. And so the questions of faith and vocation of, again, who is God calling me to be? What is God calling me to do? Break down that autopilot and pull us back into the moment, in moments that are sacred, even when they're extremely ordinary. The moments that we've seen, especially during COVID, where you can see a high school student checking you out at the grocery store, and the small acts of kindness and compassion reflect something more than just the reality that's right in front of us. They reflect the realness of the work that Christ is doing in this world to bring compassion and wholeness and health and joy uh, to the world through Christ. And so that's important for all of us. because we also see autopilot wears us down. We do get bored and frustrated and overwhelmed and burnt out. And so when working with high school students, so much of that is to help them think about faith and vocation before it can only be uh, framed within the idea of their career or their job.
Mm,
Because a lot of times when we do faith and vocation conversations with adults, because of the language of vocation, that's immediately where we land. It's vocation is your work, it's your career. And absolutely, your vocation should live in your career, but having the opportunity to work with high school students in their journey of discerning who God is calling them to be, so that who God is calling them to be lives out in everything that they do, especially in their work, but also in their family and their relationships, in the places they volunteer, do internships, in the ways that they interact with their community, their churches, their friends. That's that's a tremendous opportunity for us. And so we're so grateful for people like Adria have who've come alongside us in that journey. And uh, but we're also grateful for parents who recognize the importance of the opportunity to have those conversations early, uh, because they just change the whole trajectory of life.
yeah, absolutely. And what our kids learn is also something that we learn as well, because we're learning beside them if we're paying attention. And so when we talk about calling or vocation and our faith and how that's all related to it, so often I think we get caught up in the idea that to be called means I'm being called to be a vocational minister. And that's not what you're talking about, is it?
No. And and I could talk about my story, and I've told it 1,000 times, but to make it really short, when I felt a sense of calling in my life, that's the only frame of reference I had, uh, to live into that was the idea of vocational ministry. And so served as a youth minister for several years and loved the church and loved my work, but it wasn't what reflected who God was calling me to be and what God was calling me to do, in the way that I had been equipped and prepared, and what I was passionate about. And so I'm really excited to work with students, of course, who feel a call to congregational ministry or who feel a call to missions or whatever it is. Uh, but I'm also excited to work with students who care deeply about their faith, but are really interested in business and creating space or products that help make the world a better place. And how do we uh, help them reframe uh, what it means to go about that work? So it isn't just, how do I make this a Christian business? How do I baptize this business to make it uh,
Mm.
Christian seeming, close on Sundays and pray before we start every morning, to having something that's incarnational, that's real, that that isn't just pointing back to Christ's presence 2,000 years ago, but points to Christ's presence in the everyday, in the moment that they're in meaningful and incredible ways. So you mentioned a few people like that, with people like Maggie Kane at A Place at the Table or M. Sexton at Flourish Market, both places where Adria is involved, but also both places where there are these incredible women uh, who are telling a story of redemption that's changing the community in a real sense, but also acting as a signpost to something that Christ is always doing in our world.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's there are things that light each of us up, right? And if we stop using the language of understanding those things that light us up as just, oh, this is what I'm interested in, and this is what I'm passionate about, and start to think about the fact that why am I passionate about it? Why am I interested in it? What role did God have in planting this seed in me or this talent in me? And then what am I supposed to do with it? Right? If I am really blessed and passionate about the law, the
Mhm,
last thing I need to be, well, I shouldn't say the last thing I need to be, but perhaps being a senior pastor isn't the place that's going to light me up. It's practicing law.
mhm.
And now if I'm practicing law, how do I do that in a way that builds the kingdom, that is incarnational, as you were talking about? I mean, it's such a big question, and it's so unexplored. Right. So you're doing that work. Anything that's really surprised you because you've now been directing the Institute for what, 3+ years? Anything that surprised you that during that time?
Absolutely. One of the things that surprised me is how far ahead our high school students are right now in thinking about this. So when I've had the opportunity to stand up in front of a church and talk about this on a Sunday morning or a special Wednesday night or something like that, adults are coming up afterwards, and I want to hear more. I want to learn more about this. But when we talk with our high school students, they get it, and I think we owe a lot to our local churches for that, for the ways that uh, leaders, whether it's pastors or volunteers, have been helping students to think in those ways. Uh, but I'm also just excited, even though uh, sometimes it means we have to recalibrate what we're doing with students to make sure that we're meeting them where they need us to meet them instead of 5 steps back where we thought they needed us. Uh, that's been surprising, but also so challenging and fulfilling, and continuing to uh, think about how we support our students.
Yeah, let me set you up with a question, because it's one of the students that's come through the program in years past. Because I think it's a great question when somebody says, "Okay, so I want to be a veterinarian. How does my faith play a role in me being a vet?" Right? What does it mean to do kingdom building work or incarnational ministry if I'm a vet or a vet tech? So I'm going to lob that out at you.
Yeah, so we had a student our very first year of city that came in, named Fred, and Fred had already felt pretty certain that he wanted to be a veterinarian at that time. So we had to think through some of those pieces. What does it mean? And one of the best ways that we could help answer those questions, I love animals, but I'm not a veterinarian. So we developed a second tier of our program after that first year to introduce him to the theology of faith and vocation, and uh, expand and broaden the imagination of what that looks like. We sum up with a shadowing experience at NC State at their veterinary clinic. And they were so incredibly hospitable and kind and welcoming for him, to provide an experience for him to be able to shadow for a few days. But during that time, he got to be in the clinic and working alongside other veterinarians, and seeing just how critical a lot of those moments are as a veterinarian. Uh, when someone brings in their animal who is truly a member of their family, and you are either helping heal or sometimes helping them say goodbye to someone that's part of their family, uh, that that is something that we do as pastors, and
Mhm.
we don't attribute that same responsibility and the same weight of sacred moments to a veterinarian, but we've been there, uh, and so it's not just that he's a minister there, but that the work of love and redemption, and the patient compassion that we highlight so much as being the work of people who are called by God finds home in a lot of fields other than just ministry.
Mhm.
Or our traditional ways of thinking about ministry. It finds a home for him uh, as a veterinarian. And so after that, we're excited because Fred got the opportunity to build some relationships with folks at NC State, and now he's an undergraduate student at NC State and continuing his education there. Which, as much as we miss not being able to have him at Campbell because he's just an all-star student all around, I'm so grateful that we got to play a small part in his story of journeying into who God is calling him to be and what God is calling him to do.
Yeah, I love that phrase that you just used a minute ago, the weight of the sacred moment, right? And obviously we're not having a conversation that is discounting congregational ministry and people who feel called there, because that is critically important. I mean, that so often we find who we are as child of God through a relationship with a pastor or children's minister or youth minister, or wait for it, a key volunteer, right? We find those things there. But then what you're talking about is helping people ascribe the weight of those holy moments, those sacred moments in their everyday work life, their everyday family life. I mean, because so often vocation is defined as what you do for your occupation, but it's more nuanced than that. And I think you play in that space, and you help teenagers play in that space, and you help their parents play in that space. What 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 does the future look like when, or let me rephrase this question. What is your hope as, or what do you see as hopeful when you look at the teenagers who have come through the program?
That's a good question. Um, One of the things that I know is that the program uh, isn't an insurance policy against autopilot.
Mm,
uh, our students are going to run into those moments where they get into a career that maybe they find really meaningful at the beginning and can ascribe all the meaning to, and find a space for their faith to live in a real and incarnational way in that work. But at some point, the grind is going to get to them, and as meaningful as that work is, you can be a uh, doctor in the middle of a pandemic and feel like the work that you do is meaningless after a certain point of time. And so, what I'm hopeful for is that the students who have come through will have the tools and uh, the support networks and the friendships and the relationships and the theology of trusting that who they are is who God is calling them to be, and isn't just a mistaken case of identity or faking it until they make it, so that they can uh, identify where autopilot is and
mm,
come back to life in that work, and then also help other people. So we know, and there have been studies about this, and there hopefully will continue to be studies about that. Having one positive person in the workspace, one person who continues to remind everyone else of the mission and building morale in that space can completely transform a whole team. And so I'm hopeful that our students will spread out and they'll have a really positive impact in how we approach work as a whole as people of faith. Uh, and of course, faith is important to us, and so I hope that they'll become some of those meaningful volunteers in their churches. That they will, whether they're working with other adults or whether they're working with the next generation of youth, that uh, they'll be those people who are helping future students understand the role of faith and vocation as well.
yeah, that's so good. I mean, it's so very good. Um, I think as if we're not careful when we go on autopilot, we miss the work of Christ around us in the world. And I think that's one of the great dangers. And so if we're going to recognize those sacred moments, we have to protect our souls and our spirits against that being on autopilot. And so building community and building accountability and all of those pieces is so very important. So Colin, I want people to be able to find you if they want to, if they have more comments or questions, or want to know more about City. And City has hit a pause because the university has put pause on all in-person programming, even during the summer, this past summer, obviously, but even for 2021. But that doesn't mean that the work of the Theological Institute has stopped. And you're doing some really important work there. And so I want people to know how they can find you. So is the best way to go to the campbell.edu and just search Youth Theological Institute, or search Colin Kroll?
Yep, those are the best ways. My email is real simple. It's CKROLL@campbell.edu. And always love conversation, especially in 2021, which we're kind of designating as a year of listening for City, and really wanting to hear from parents and students and ministers as we think through what the future looks like. So absolutely thrilled to hear from anyone who wants to continue having those conversations.
Well, we'll make sure when we post this that we also post contact ways to get in touch with you through either the website or email. Colin, you're doing really important work. I'm proud to call you friend and proud to call you colleague, and grateful for the way you challenge me and the way you keep all of us on our toes, thinking about not just faith and vocation, but also the things that come out of our mouths, um, so that we don't become part of the fodder for you. Um, which is all obviously in good humor and well intended and good natured. So, Colin, thank you for the light and the joy that you bring to the world. You're doing good work. When somebody asks me what's good, I can point to you and say, Colin is what's good.
Well, thanks. I'm grateful for you too. And I'm grateful for the time to be with you this morning. This was a nice break from the monotony of closing out the semester.
Right, because you're there and I'm technically on vacation recording this. So so we will gather again soon, but thanks for your time this morning.
Absolutely.